Shalom. This week there are many events that occurred which I think have profound interconnections and a very important message from the Torah portion to help us deal with them. First of all, we had President Obama's speech, and I've given a previous video about that. But I think one of the disturbing things about it was that the only legitimacy that he presented to the Arab world about the reason for the State of Israel has to do with the Holocaust. Nothing about the historic right of the Jewish people to that land, the historic praying 3 times a day for restoration of that land, the whole emphasis in Judaism about it, the whole story of the Bible about it, nothing about that. Second of all, we've had the situation of a nice guard who's doing his job defending the Holocaust Museum against intruders was shot and killed by an 88 or 89-year-old anti-Semite who had a long history of known anti-Semitism. And I must say that wherever I went, the main conversation this week among anyone I bumped into, Jewish, was, what do you think about the Holocaust Museum? And the profound question there is, why are people so concerned about it? You could just say it was one guard, one guy who got killed. People get killed every day. I think it has to do with the purposeful attempt to kill people who are in an institution designed to remember the mass murder of 6 million Jews in the face of people who are denying it, like the Iranian president. Speaking of that, the Iranians are going to the voting booth to elect a new president against the so-called moderate versus the fanatic, and whether it will make any difference or the mullahs really are in control and are going to proceed full blast getting an atomic bomb. Then we had the story of the former minister of President Obama, Rev Wright, who basically said it's the Jews who are denying his ability to talk to the president. And he tried to apologize by saying he didn't mean offense to Jews, he meant the Zionists, as if that's any better. Here we have another effort of rearing up anti-Semitism in America. And then the story of fanaticism, of somebody who decided that even though they were opposed to late-term abortions, the proper way to deal with that was not at the ballot box and through political action, but rather by murdering the doctor who performed those abortions legally. And finally, went to Fiddler on the Roof, which is having its last run in Chicago with Topol, who's now 73, who started out at 31 doing Tevye. And how profoundly moving it was again to see Fiddler, even though I've seen it many times, and how it was another example of the dislocation of the Jewish people being forced by Tsarist Russia to leave their homes where they've been for 1,000 years. So what is in the Torah portion? What is it about the Torah portion this week and the haftarah that give us a sense about all of this? Well, first of all, we have the story about the Levites being consecrated for their duty, who got the job because of the sin of the firstborn, time of the golden calf. And the sin of the firstborn who were responsible for the cult until then, building an idol and worshiping an idol, led to the Levites taking over their job, and that's important to remember. Number 2, we had the beginning of the march of the Israelites towards Israel, which remind us of that it's not just the Holocaust that gave rise to Israel, but thousands of years ago, the desire of the Jewish people to be in Israel. And then it says something interesting. Normally the ark was supposed to be in the center of the camp, but when they started the march, they had the ark at the front. And why? Well, the commentators say it's because when the people would see the ark in their front, they knew that they should be focused on the ark, and the ark would give them courage and inspiration and confidence. In addition to that, the Torah tells us what words they said when they lifted up the ark. It's the same words we say every time we have a Torah service now, which is Vayihi bin Soharon, Vayomer Moshe, and it talks about how the enemies of God should flee. And so it tells us that in the liturgy, God has enemies, and they should flee before the ark, which hopefully will inspire us with confidence. And finally, to make mention of the parasha, there's a lot of murmuring motifs. The people complain all the time, and it gets God upset and Moses upset. And one of their complaints was that they remembered how fondly it was to be in Egypt to eat, and they mentioned leeks and cucumbers and onions. So these people were slaves being murdered, mass murdered by the Egyptians, and they, in the desert, prefer to go back and want to eat onions and cucumbers, even though they're being mass murdered and treated as slaves. And how sometimes we just lose total sense of balance and priority. Now, the selection of the rabbis for the haftarah for this week is the same one for Shabbat Hanukkah. It's from Zechariah, who, because of the link of the candles, the menorah being at the beginning of the Torah portion and being part of the haftarah, but also there's a very famous sentence in this haftarah by Zechariah, not by might nor by spirit, but by the not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of God, the Ruach. And that was the rabbis added that because of the zealotry of the Hasmoneans in the end, after they were victorious against the Greeks, over their overzealotry. We have the problem of overzealotry constantly in Jewish history, in American history, and in world history. And the main issue today is not all Muslims, but this large number of fanatic Muslims who are trying to wreak havoc in the world. And so what do we learn from all of these events? Well, I was inspired by the Fiddler on the Roof again about living an intensely Jewish life and knowing that historically Jews have been kicked out of various places, but we've never stopped living as Jews. And that was typified by the part of the Torah portion which said the menorah, the light, and the ark should lead. You should have your eyes fixed on the light and the ark of the Torah to remember the way to the future. And we also have to remember that God has real enemies in the world. The anti-Semite who shot that guard at the Holocaust Museum and tried to desecrate the memory of 6 million dead Jews, Rev Wright and his belief about some kind of Jewish conspiracy, the Iranian president, who hopefully won't be president very long, although I don't think it'll make much difference, who talked about when they want to destroy Israel and the Holocaust didn't exist, the fanatics who decided to use violence against that abortion doctor. All of that we remember today. And please remind the President that the historic reason for the State of Israel, which should be said openly to the Arab Muslim world, is the historic desire of the Jewish people to live in that land, how the Jews have always lived in that land. The only time they left was when they were forced out. It's not just a colonial American imposition because of the Holocaust. And so the news of the week is distressing, but we have confidence and courage going forward because the Ark always leads us. Vayihi b'nsoa Aaron.